In modern culture, dreams have lost a lot of their relevance. However, dreams are fascinating, and the more energy you give to them, the more they tend to reveal. Dreams, if you do really inquire into their essence, start to raise really important questions about the nature of reality. Here I'm going to talk to dreams, synchronicity, and the unfolding of meaning. Not to imply that dreams are a place where we process the day's events, which is a conventional, modern, materialist view of dreams, but to imply that the source of both dreams and waking reality is the same, that symbols that arrive to our dreamscape can also arrive in our lives as we go about our day-to-day. Many spiritual traditions say that reality is like a dream, and it's this shared hallucination, this conscious dreaming up of reality that really points to consciousness as an underlying foundation of the world that we experience through the conventional senses. I've covered synchronicity a lot on Mind That Ego. There are a number of podcast episodes, various articles, but just for a recap, synchronicity is where events are linked by meaning. Carl Jung used the term acausal to suggest that when an internal, psychological, emotional, dreamt experience presents itself in our waking reality, there's no causal link in a conventional sense. Unlike, for example, an event that appears because of something that you've done in the waking life. You post a letter and it arrives to the person who the letter is addressed to. A synchronicity, a causally connected, would be dreaming about a certain person and then receiving a letter from them. Because they emerge from what we call the unconscious, their texture is metaphorical, symbolic, and poetic, and I will go into this more, but that's to say that they have a different language. The waking reality, the coherent, rational reality, is one way of perceiving the world. However, events linked by meaning generally have that symbolic, emotional undertone. They're not necessarily rational, and yet inwardly there's a strong sense of meaning and value and understanding that might not match conventional language. So there's an overlap of the perceived inner world and the perceived outer world. And in essence, there's a sense of continuity or unfoldment that transcends both mind and matter. I appreciate that's quite an involved sentence, but that's just to say, like the example with the letter being posted, events overcome the material cause and effect that we're used to. And there's a sense of continuation between both inner and outer processes. I don't want to make assumptions, so it's important also to look at what is a dream? What is the nature of the dreamscape? There's a beautiful quote from Carl Jung that says, "We are so captivated by and entangled in our subjective consciousness that we have forgotten the age-old fact that God speaks to us chiefly through dreams and visions." Jung, in many ways, energized and resurrected this approach for a modern, civilized Western culture. But for centuries, our ancestors, in fact more than centuries, thousands and thousands of years, our ancestors have looked to the dream world in order to understand not only external events, but internal spiritual domains. We could look at a dream as a hallucination or fully immersive inner experience that unfolds without conscious effort while you sleep. So as your body rests, there are entire worlds that are created without your conscious effort. It happens all by itself. Again, some mainstream modern approaches to dreams is to look at that as random information processing, that the brain is just kind of integrating the sensory input from the day. That's almost as far in the other direction as a suggestion, like Jung says, that these are messages from God, that there are intelligences and forms of communication way beyond the narrow confines of the ego in which dreams communicate with us. Again, because they exist in this realm of the symbolic, they have much less structure than waking reality. They're less coherent from at least the rational lens, the cause and effect lens, and are more primordial. They're more mushy. The symbol of them, the appearance of them can feel chaotic, and the sense behind the dream cannot feel fully formed. And a lot of the time we do have to use our conscious mind to parse apart meaning, to allow that to land in a way that we can consciously, rationally, logically understand. Not only can we communicate with the transcendent, with God, with our higher self through dreams, also our sense of becoming who we are, our sense of personal and spiritual growth is very much intertwined by our dreams, not least because they present to us unconscious material. They confront us with parts of ourselves that we may willingly or unwillingly ignore or avoid. And that includes both the shadow and the light. So dreams are worlds within themselves. There's an abundance of information, there's an abundance of characters and scenarios and landscapes and events and sensory input. We don't tend to think of dreams as being perceived, and yet dreams contain sight, sound, smells even. So there is within the dream a sensory input. There's a dream ego, a point of consciousness within the dream that is witnessing the unfolding. One of the biggest learning points for me in terms of the dreamscape was Jungian philosophy, particularly the work of Marie-Louise von Franz, and how dreams and synchronicity relate to the self. And I'm going to use this term in the Jungian context, the self with a capital S. To give a sample of this, Marie-Louise von Franz says, the self is with us throughout the whole of life, but also that it exists beyond the consciously realized flow of life, which is what creates our experience of time. Just as the self is not entirely contained in our conscious experience of time, in our space-time dimension, it is also simultaneously omnipresent. So there is this godlike effect to the self. There is something that is outside in space and time that can interfere in some way, or at least engage with and collaborate with the linear unfolding of our lives, what we, through our sense of cohesion of past, present and future, can feel like linearity. The self is outside of that. Therefore, meaning can unfold through that linear progression. I'll get back to this if that sounds a bit far out. Within this context, the self is the organizing principle of the inner world. It's beyond the conscious mind to such a degree you can never quite fully grasp it, but see its byproduct. The self is never more on display than in dreams. The self architects the environment, the characters and the events and the emotions. Dreams are, in that sense, the biggest window to the grandeur and the magnificence of the self, when realizing that within the dreamscape, you have created everything, even though you're playing a part in that dream. Synchronicity goes even further to suggest that the self, in this sense, also architects our outer environment in a similar way. So best understood holistically, the self is part of a wider system, all interconnected, or hyper-intelligent and outside of the isolated conscious ego. So you could think of it as a universal collective mind in some way that then separates into the self, that then orchestrates the big picture behind the narrow lens of the ego. Within this orchestration, symbols or meaningful experiences from dreams can surface or penetrate or interact with waking life. And that is the biggest and most profound realization of the self. All of which suggests a continuum. The next question is, if something meaningful is unfolding, what is unfolding? So we might see this as insight, as comprehension, or to a higher degree, revelation, something that is revealed about your life, about your inner world, that has a really strong impact and a transformative nature. It may also point to a new life direction or inner guidance. If you're stuck in a situation, if you're looking for the next step, really just an insight into the path ahead, one that is largely mysterious, but one which feels guided by a higher principle. It may point to the need for integration of or the presentation of unconscious material. This is a huge part of the Jungian analysis, particularly dream work. Certain characters in the dream may be repressed or denied aspects of the self. It's also information with a strong emotional and spiritual impact that is deeply, deeply personal. But the core of this unfolding is a symbol in its totality that unfolds across time and space. So you can think of this like an acorn, DNA or binary code. There's an encoding within the unfoldment. To put that another way, going back to the continuity of linear time, because the self is outside of time and space, there's a wholeness to what is unfolding. It's already fully contained. On some level, the knowing, the insight, the revelation is already there, but the unfolding comes into time, and therefore it acts more like a holistic process where the completion of that unfoldment and the beginning of that unfoldment are both contained within a linear process, just like how an acorn can be encoded to grow into an oak tree. The end point of that oak tree is encoded within the acorn whilst it's still an acorn. It's a very similar process. In the context of this exploration, the unfolding of meaning moves between a dream and an external event. So there might be a profound spiritual insight. There might be a revelation of something that is presented to you in a dream. And then through synchronicity, a meaningful link with an external event, that continuity follows through the dreaming state and the waking state. It could be that a symbol or an insight from a dream then presents itself in the following days or the following weeks, but there's a sense of continuity and the meaning continuing to unfold in both of these seemingly separate dimensions. Of course, it's not a one-off event, and because we're talking to time and space, it's not linear either, but generally we can see this as the unfolding of meaning, as the insight unfolds, as the theme becomes clearer within the conscious mind, there's a continuity that goes between dream, external event, dream, dream, external event, dream, right? It's not a predictable order. It's actually more the flourishing of that acorn, of that DNA. The core meaning is becoming more apparent, and the individual components, the comprehension, the puzzle pieces, to just mix so many metaphors, starts to appear across domains, but in a sense that the building going between the dream and the external event in linear time is greater comprehension. Even if initially it doesn't make sense and there are a series of dreams and events that are unfolding and the conscious mind can't keep up, there's generally a building effect from this unfolding process. Again, this is inextricably linked to wholeness. We cannot comprehend this without a holistic way of looking at reality. To quote David Bohm, the physicist who was in conversation with Jiddu Krishnamurti, space is not empty, it is full, a plenum as opposed to a vacuum, and is the ground for existence of everything, including our conscious experience. The universe is not separate from this cosmic sea of energy. David Bohm's famous theory in the field of quantum physics was the implicate and explicate order, which really does link to Jung's idea of the unconscious. So we could say that below the unfolding of insight, of revelation through the dreamscape, through the waking state, there is an order, there's a sense of wholeness behind it, that through the dream, through the waking reality, our conscious mind is piecing together. That outside of the conscious mind, there's a totality and an order that requires space and time for the process to be unfollowed, for the growth to follow that certain trajectory. And in the conscious, the linear, the time and space, there's a growing understanding, and the dream and the external event contributes to that growing understanding. I appreciate this is a complex and also condensed overview, and I just want to introduce a few ideas to give a sense of the link between the unfolding of meaning and the unconscious dimension, the symbolic, and how that exists, to refer back to that Marie-Louise von Franz quote as outside of time and space. There are bigger questions as to whether all meaning, all symbols within your life, within my life, are there in their totality, or if they also are part of an emergent process. I don't have an answer for that right now, but my sense is that at least at some point within the linear unfolding of your life, there is a totality that is then communicating. So I want to leave you with that, and leave you with the contemplation of the relevance of continuity between your dreams and between waking reality, and to start to inquire and engage with a potential source of that meaningful unfolding through the dream, through waking reality. The more you engage, the more this does reveal. And synchronicity is the bridge. It's not just intellectual. Don't worry about trying to remember this. It's just, as long as this can evoke some kind of feeling to inspire you to inquire and to break down the boundaries between the self as an individual and the self with a capital S, orchestrating these events, it does allow for an enriched and an enchanted way of relating to the waking reality, and more of a bridge between both. And I think that's the task that we have, to bridge both the richness of the inner world with the dreamlike nature of the outer world, and bring them both together in some kind of harmony.